Hello. Today I've decided to build a base game starter home in Oasis Springs, and it's the dusty turf plot. So I decided to try and do a 1 bedroom base game starter so that it was useful to lots of people, especially those starting out. So I just did 2 rectangles off centre to try and give a bit of dimension so that there's a bit of interest to the outside of the house. I've just placed a base game cheap bed in the build just to give myself an idea of sizes, because I find for a starter home it's important to try and keep the sizes small so that you're not spending too much money on the build and cluttering it up with things which would also cost more money, because we're trying to keep it under 20,000 simoleons. So I'm just putting lights in so that I can see what I'm doing. My plan for the build was to have a open plan living area with a kitchen, diner and living room all in one space. So you can see now I'm looking to place some of the kitchen items just to give myself an idea of size as well, to make sure I've got enough room for everything, but it's not too big, just the perfect sort of size. So I hadn't yet decided exactly where I was going to place the kitchen. I just thought I'd put some counters and bits in to give myself some ideas. As you see, I don't really like it in that linear format, but I'm still trying to think about it. So I go and have a look at sofas to see what sofa to use, to see if that helps me work out placement any better. I put in a little entrance hall, but I later get rid of that because just of money really, and because of the roofing. So now I'm looking at the size, and I've made it slightly bigger because I didn't feel like it was really big enough to encompass the kitchen and a decent size living area, because I leave kind of like a walkway down the centre of the house so that there's access to the back garden as well. So you can see now I'm repositioning kitchen, trying to work out how to position that. They always say that it's good to have your appliances in a triangle, so to try and keep the oven, fridge and sink in a sort of triangular configuration. I'm guessing that's for ease of use. I'm not really sure. But that's what I've heard other people say anyway. So that's what I tend to do as well. Aesthetically, it's quite pleasing also. So now I'm trying to figure out how to position the kitchen in relation to the living room to try and add an area for dining as well. At the moment, I'm looking at kitchen islands, which I later discard, but I thought it was worth leaving in the video to kind of show the thought process, and how, you might think originally an idea is going to work out and then you change your mind. So I'm looking to position the sink in the kitchen island at the moment to give that triangular appearance. I don't like having the sink off to one side. I prefer to have it kind of in the middle. So I'm looking at trying to make an island now to incorporate the sink into the middle, but then there's not much of a walkway between the island and the cabinet to get through to the fridge. So you can see I positioned it again. There isn't really a walkway there either. I'm messing about now with kitchen stools to see what I like the look of. And you can see I go back and forth a number of times trying to work out the best positioning. So now I decide to put in kind of like a fake island. So it's not one that the Sims can sit at and eat, but it gives the appearance of a kitchen island. And I'm using those end cabinets to again try and make the sink more central without it taking up lots of room. So then I place a small dining room table, making sure it's base game. On the other side of my island to sort of differentiate the kitchen space, the dining space between the living space, but still having that open plan feel, which is really good for a starter home because of its size. So then I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to look and decide. Wanted a more expensive television, but decided against it because I couldn't really afford that in a starter home. Now I'm looking for a back door. So I put in a back door with a window, and then I later reconfigure that because I don't really like the way it looks. It looks a bit odd, I think, positioned like that. Now I'm putting in windows for the rest of the build, trying to work out where they sit in relation to the furniture and how they look from the outside of the build as well. Putting in a smaller window for the bathroom. I was trying to work out if I could place a window for the kitchen, but decided against it. Now I'm just moving things around, trying to figure out internal doors for the bedroom and the bathroom. And then I was trying to think about this entrance hall thing that I had, which I do really like the idea of in real life, but for the Sims I'm not really sure that they actually need it, but I'm still trying to figure that out at the moment. So I put in an archway, thinking that I'll keep that. I discard the window because I feel like it doesn't really look aesthetically very pleasing. So now I'm still trying to consider how I'm going to set up this living room. I decide that the white and black is just a bit too stark. And I go for this very light wood colour with the white kitchen surfaces. You can see I'm going through, changing swatches, trying to see what goes well together. As we all know, all the swatches in The Sims are quite different in colour, so it can be difficult to match them up. So I'm looking for curtains now, although they are an expense that you don't really need for a base game build because Sims don't really need curtains. They do add quite a nice touch, I think. They make it feel a little bit more realistic. I don't think you'd want to live in a house necessarily without any curtains, especially in the bedroom, but also in the living room, especially in Oasis Springs. I guess if you live somewhere really hot, it would be quite nice to have curtains to block out the sun. So now I'm looking at wallpapers, trying to choose some wallpapers. I tend to look through the basic darks, even if I try to use lighter swatches, because I don't really like the more pale sort of pastel colours. So I'm going through, I've put wallpaper in the living area, in the bedroom. Now I'm looking for tiles for the bathroom area. I like the subway kind of look. And now I'm remembering that we've got more, well, I'm looking through and then I find the extra swatches of that subway sort of tile. So I use that in the kitchen and then I go back into the bathroom to use the same sort of creamy beigey colour subway style tiles are in there. Still trying to figure out what I want the outside to look like. I quite like the wooden swatch of that door, but there aren't any matching windows. So then I'm trying to figure out what door swatch to go with to match the windows. I don't like the way that looks on the inside, so I go back to the plain white. So I'm still figuring out. Now I'm looking at the outside and how to approach the roofing. I'm not great at roofing. I do struggle. I still have to, experiment and go through a bit of trial and error. Wanted to try and keep it more modern with these sort of half gabled roofs with these sorts of pieces. And then I'm just trying to figure out how to configure them together so that they look cohesive. It's now that I'm thinking about what to do with this entrance door, entrance hall. So I'm still trying to figure out with the roofing and the hallway how to make it look. And here I am thinking about taking that whole piece out now and just having the doorway, the front door, go straight into the living space. Just working out the overhangs of the roof. I do like a little overhang, but not where they coincide with each other necessarily, because it looks a little bit weird. Putting a little sun awning over the front door just to give it a little bit of dimension and something a bit more pleasing for the eye. I'm just checking now in the living area, back outside, trying to figure out how I'll make it all match. I go back and forth. So now I'm thinking about flooring. I've just put down wooden flooring for the living area in the bedroom. And I'm looking at putting some sort of tiling in for the bathroom. I'm realising that the base game tiles are really not that pleasing. So I decided to use one of the more sort of, are they hexagons? I think they're hexagons for the bathroom because they're a lot more modern, a lot more pleasing to the eye. I decided to add that into the kitchen area as well to give that some more definition, define it a little bit more from the other areas in that big open plan living space. Now I'm looking through, trying to find a nice rug for the living area and realising again that we're quite limited with our rug choices for the base game. I'm trying to find something that will kind of match the very beige appearance that I've ended up going for, but it just felt like it fitted in Oasis Springs. I don't feel like you'd have anything too dark because it's a hot world. So I feel like you'd have lighter colours to try and, reflect the sun and the heat a little bit rather than absorb it. Trying to configure the bedroom a little bit better now. trying to think about trying to fit in a desk. I go back and forth again a little bit. I think I put the dresser in the living area, thinking that it kind of double up, so you've got the functionality still of having a dresser in the build, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in the bedroom. So just a basic desk, but I'm deciding that there's probably not really enough space in the bedroom if we're going to be adding a desk area with a computer as well, which is always really handy in any build. We'll know that Sims struggle to function without a computer because there are a lot of different functions for gameplay that you need the computer for. It's also good for entertainment as well. Looking at bedside cabinets, realising that the base game really is limited to what furniture you can choose, and trying to keep it budget friendly, as well as trying to aesthetically match things a little bit best I can. So now I'm looking at chairs to put in for the desk, and I go for a more traditional type of office chair. And then I'm thinking about, can I put some books in somewhere to add another thing for your Sims to have, because books are always handy to have in any build. So I just decided to go with the little books that will sit on the desk rather than a big bookcase, because the functionality is still the same. I'm still considering that dresser and whether I actually like it or not. So while I think about that, I decided to paint the outside of the build. I'm looking through, trying to figure out how I wanted to look. I'm kind of looking at the builds around a little bit as well to try and make it match in with its surrounding builds. I decided to go for a fairly light swatch of slats and just putting a swatch on the roof to try and match it in. I really don't like many of the roofing swatches. I really struggle with those. A little bit of roof trim just to finish it off. Just checking the area. You'll see I kind of flip back and forth. If I get stuck and can't really figure out what to do with one part of the build, then I kind of move on to a different part for a bit and then, go back to it. So I'm moving the build forward a little bit on the plot. So I'm just figuring out where to position everything. Moving the mailbox, that into a good spot. I'm back inside now. Trying to figure out if I can afford to add some kitchen cabinets to finish that off, make that look a bit more pleasing. Putting in a smoke alarm. We all know Sims like to start a fire. Figuring out the bin situation. So a little bin in the kitchen by the back door. Now I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do in the bedroom and whether to put the dresser in the bedroom or not. Again, very limited to the furniture because it's base game. So I try to use this dresser that I'm not sure when we got that in base game, what it was for, but So then I'm thinking, well, I don't really need the dresser in the living room anymore, and that's expensive, and I don't really like the way it looks. So I go back to the original table that I had for the television there. I'm swapping things about, seeing if I can make it work better. Now I start messing with the swatches to try and make things match and look like they belong with one another a little more. And in the end, I decide to go quite dark with the swatches to try and make it all kind of match a bit better. So there I am changing the swatches. I changed the doors to a more woodeny swatch. I look to see if I can do that with the back door. But I don't really like the fact that it makes the back door a different colour both sides. So I go back to the original white. Right, I need to figure out the bathroom before I spend all the budget on other things. I put in a bath and shower unit, a toilet, and obviously a sink. And it takes me a little while to work out what mirror to use because I don't really use the base game mirrors, because I never really can find one that I like the look of. I don't like the way that one sticks out, but I guess it's realistic in the fact that it could have a little bit of a cupboard inside it for toiletries, medicines and whatnot. So soaps and toothbrushes, and that's pretty much the bathroom figured out. I'm thinking about whether to put a blind on the window or not, and I decide I may as well do that because I still think, although the window's very high, it wouldn't be very nice to have it uncovered. I'm back in the bedroom now trying to figure out lighting. So I decided to put a couple of bedside lights and a little light on the desk. And I take out the main light because I think it's quite nice to have lower lighting in the bedroom, just because I think that's quite realistic. Figuring out the lighting in the kitchen area now, trying to put something over that kind of fake island, and a light in the living room, just a plain base game light. Just check in what it would look like in gameplay as well. Still looking through to see if there's anything else that I want to add in the way of art. It's difficult. There's a very limited amount of art in the base game, I feel, that works in this build for me. So I'm just looking through, seeing if there is anything that I like and where I could potentially place it, and if it's worth the extra budget. I quite like that piece that's quite sort of modern, and it goes well in this build. I'm looking to see if there's anything else that I can find that I can squeeze in somewhere, but I'm really struggling to figure that out. So I go back out and looking at the builds around me to guide me as to the things that I choose for the outside. Now I started with this terrain paint, but you can see that it's wonky, and I really don't like that. There may be some background noise. I've still got the windows open. It's still quite warm here. So then I go with the gravel instead because you can't tell whether that's wonky or not. I'm trying to add in a little bit more dimension by doing a little bit down the side, but that was a bit too extreme. So I just go in with a softer sand swatch just to soften up the edges of that gravel. I'm looking through just to try and add a little bit of landscaping, checking what the other properties have got outside to try and match it in a little bit. So I just went with some wild flowers. I believe they're from Debug, so that they're not adding to the cost of the build. And again, looking through for some swatches just to make it a little bit more realistic, because those flowers do not look that realistic on their own. Putting a few cacti in because it is Oasis Springs and that feels appropriate. Again, trying to figure out with the terrain paint how to give it a bit more dimension to make it look a little bit more realistic. Adding in a little bit of a sandy swatch because I think the ground underneath that grass would be a bit more sandy given the world that we're in. Adding in a few palm trees because they are the trees that are around in the other parts of landscaping. So I'm just going with that to fill up some of the plot, because again, trying to keep it very budget friendly. So I'm just basically looking through Debug to see what can I add that doesn't cost very much but makes it look a little bit more realistic. Again, looking at the stones, because as you can see in the background they've got some stones in their sort of ordinary landscaping. So I figure I'll just dot some stones about to try and make it work. There you go, just moving things around a little bit. And then adding a little bit more terrain paint around those tree areas. That was too much, as you can see, so I go back in with a softer swatch, more blurred swatch to make it blend it more. Now I'm trying to think if I can add a fence, give more of a backyard sort of appeal, but it does make it quite pricey, so I do end up abandoning this idea. You'll see I look through, I'm trying to find a gate that would work, but I don't find any gates that I would actually like. They're either too small or they look a bit too grand, a bit too fancy. So as I say, I think about leaving it just open, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll just take the back bit out and leave the side bits in for a little bit of privacy, taking some of those landscape pieces around to the back area just to make it look a little bit more lived in. realised it's clipping a little bit, trying to make sure I move it so that it doesn't clip into the house. I don't mind if it goes through the fence a little bit. I feel like that would, you would expect to see that out and about normally. Now I'm looking at the debug fencing, so I'm still not entirely happy with the fencing that I have because of the price and the fact that I can't find a suitable gate. So I just add in that wall just to give it a little bit of dimension, and it's debug, so it doesn't really cost anything, so I can save a bit more money that way. I'm still thinking about what to try and do outside here, so I put in a bench and a table so that there's somewhere for the Sims to sit and eat if they choose to. A nice jaunty angle just to give it a little bit of definition, just to give something for the eye to look at. I think it's nicer than having it all perfectly uniform. Putting a barbecue out there. Thinking about how to use landscaping again, and not landscaping, terrain paint to give a bit of a patio, the feel of a patio area. Again, I'm looking to try and soften up the edges, make it look a bit more realistic, adding in a few more landscaping bits and pieces to try and give it a more lived in feel. Putting in a trash can out the back, something that I quite often forget to put in my builds. Just trying to see now, think about how I can make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm trying to round it off a little bit, make it look a little bit more like, gravel has just been popped down. Putting in a little bit of a lighter swatch, making it look a bit more sun bleached. Trying to go around the edge there to make it look more realistic. Again, just going in with that sandy swatch, just going in with the terrain paint, give it a little bit more dimension. Make it look a bit more realistic, a bit more pretty. Give it that lived in appearance. Going around the edges now, where you would if you were looking at a property in real life. The grass would not be beautiful around the edges of those things. It would look a bit more bare, a bit more worn out. So again, just using the terrain paint to try and mimic that. Trying to decide whether to put another bit of debug wall in, but not really thinking that it works. So getting rid of that idea. Looking at the back, feeling like it's a bit plain. So I add in an air vent at the back there. So now just adding in a few lights around the outside. A light at the front door. And I go around the back and add a light around the back, the patio area there. Also, the same light above the barbecue. It's probably a fire hazard, but So here we are, finished build, the outside, a shot of the inside, the kitchen. the bathroom area, the bedroom with the little office, the back garden, and a bird's eye view. Thank you for watching.